fingernail. No feed? Yeah, I was going to say it's got a green now. Feeding through okay? Nay, yay. Okay. All righty. Well, today we are going to be going over the session 10, which is called Trust, in our continuing story on Gideon and his work through and with God as he is trying to help the Israelites get through the oppressors who are the Midianites. And it's this is kind of a story of battle, but really it's not. It When you go through the story, it's really cool to see how uh, that Gideon uh, is really no different than what we are today. I mean, the whole world is so obsessed with big numbers. I mean, everything's got to be a big number, and sometimes we even are willing to accept less quality to get to that big number. And what I'm talking about with big numbers is that we've always in our life always heard the bigger the better, which isn't always necessarily true, but that's what we've always been told about. And this is what Gideon believed. Gideon believed bigger the better initially, but he trusted God, believed in what God was telling him, and as he moved forward in his endeavor here, um, he had chose an army that we're going to get into all this, but he had picked his army out, 32,000 men, because he thought with this is what he got together to go up against the Midianites. And the one thing that we'll go through this lesson on is that God had a different plan, and he had to convince Gideon that of what his plan was for this. And God likes to use all his people to be involved in what he's doing because sometimes we want to be certain these people are involved to give the glory. And who are we trying to give the glory to? Is it to ourselves? It's to God. And that's what this story is about. It's about getting Gideon to trust God, to do what God's asking so God can get the glory out of what Gideon's performance is going to do. And, Gideon was going up against 135,000 Midianites that were at that time the oppressors of Israel. And he wanted, they were to get them out of Israel, get them gone. And he was thinking that, he could probably do it with these 32,000 men. A little nervous, I'm sure. He thought, wow, we're outnumbered, almost 4-1. I'm sure he was very nervous. He's human. And then God comes to him and tells him that, I think there's another way we need to go about this. And in our lives, sometimes, just like in Gideon's world here, is that we are being told by God on a daily basis of things he wants us to do. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't. But the problem is trusting God to do the right thing. And a lot of times if we trust God in what he's telling us to do, the results not only turn out good, but in many cases they always seem to turn out better if we truly can put our faith in God and what he's asking us to do. And you know, I I think about things that I've done in my life that at first, the one that comes to my mind is that I'll never forget back in probably about 2016, I told my wife, I'm being told we need to move. Our house is almost paid for, great neighborhood, great neighbors, not a problem in the world. But for some reason, in my head, I got this thing that we need to move down, take care of mom. And Candy looked at me, she goes, no, I'm not, no, I don't want to leave. I like it here. We raised our kids here. This is great. I don't want to leave here. So for 2 years, we kind of went back and forth. And then finally in 2018, God told her, time to move. And she came to me one day. I'll never forget it. She goes, you're right. I just haven't been listening. She goes, we need to move. So we moved quick, and it happened fast, and we got down here to mom. And the funny thing about it is that it only gave us about 2 years to be with mom because mom was at that time we didn't realize it, but mom was going downhill, and not Alzheimer's. They called it Alzheimer's. I believe it was dementia, but it was starting to take hold. She was 94 at the time, and by the time we got down to her, she was 95, and it was really starting to get bad. And we tried to work it out for a couple of years, but it was like I was being pushed early, but it took Candy just a little while longer to hear it. And when she heard it, she moved. And that move was the best thing because it gave us 2 years to be with mom we wouldn't have had, close years. And it was a blessing, even though we had to put her in a home because she needed professional care. But it was a blessing to have her for that period of time that we wouldn't have had. So that just comes to my mind. Any examples here that y'all remember that you fought what was going on?
What you kind of did is you got back to your roots because your grandfather owned the land.
Yeah,
Before then, all that was taken care of. You got back to where you almost felt like you belonged.
you're right.
Returned to ancestral politics.
Smith. I live in the Smith City.
Yeah, you live in the Smith City, Smith City Hill up there,
Yep,
right?
yep. It
That's what I said. It brought you back, put you back
yeah,
on the hill again.
and that's what I need, and that's what I needed, and that's what Candy needed. But what has happened in your lives that you tried to ignore God? And, you knew you were being talked to, maybe you didn't understand, but you ignored it until finally it came through.
When you're out there, sometimes do you ever feel like a warmth is close to you and somebody's nudging you and like they're with you? If you own that own property, that's what happens.
Yeah,
You got somebody watching after you, whether you know it or not. I believe in angels.
yep.
I've had times where he sent people to help me do things out of the blue
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that you just don't expect.
And sometimes it's people you haven't seen in a while.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know.
One time in particular, I had him send a guy that I'd only met one time,
Mm-hmm.
and I had met him at a dinner party at a friend's place. He had a cookout at his house in Palmetto, and a friend of mine here in Lutherville used to work with the guy there in Palmetto, and I, you know, got to be friends with him through them. Well, this guy, his name was Franklin. I can't even remember his last name now, and he was there at that cookout. So we talked. Well, then 3, 4 months later, I had a truck stalled on the railroad tracks down in Blowmoreland at Post Road.
Bad spot.
Bad spot. He comes by. He drives the truck.
Yeah.
He comes by in the truck he's driving and sees me, recognizes me from meeting me that one time and stops. I get to talking to him. He's running late on his route. He shouldn't have been there. He should have been gone by an hour before that. All right, that's the first
Yeah.
one. The second one was Bobby Olmstead. Bobby was working second shift at that time. And for some reason, Bobby had come home from work. Instead of going to bed, he had to go to Grantville for something. And Bobby came by. Bobby's one that gave me a ride back to the house to get my pickup.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Bob Inchkin, you knew Bob that carried the mail. He was running late on his mail route. He pulled up there just as the truck stalled out, still had the smoke and all coming out of it. And when he pulled up, we heard the train whistle blow. And he runs up the train track 2 miles in the car toward Moore. Runs up there by the train to flag the train down. The train pulled up there and stopped in front of my truck.
Or
And
yeah.
it was 7 empty cars was all was on that engine. And all three of them people that came to my aid were running late. We're not supposed to be there.
That's
Yeah.
And tell me that wasn't God sending somebody to
That's
get me.
powerful. That is
praise the
powerful.
Lord. There. That's when you get out of
And
the truck.
and the guy, the engineer on that train, told me. He said there's a 300 car train 20 minutes behind me. He said I've already radioed.
Slow. Everybody slow everybody
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
Wow.
So
You know.
that kind of stuff sticks with you.
Yeah, it does. It does. And you can't deny, I'm sorry. You can't deny it.
And I've had
Something
times when
happens.
I was the person that was went to help somebody, and they tell me I was praying for somebody to come and help me.
Yeah.
I've had that happen too.
And sometimes we do things and we don't even think about it. It's just to us, it's something we did. It's
The
just
Lord
natural.
nudging you to do it.
Yeah.
You don't
Oh,
think
And we
yeah.
don't
about
even think about it. We do it. I was in Chick-fil-A one
it. That's
time. There
just
was a lady in a
one.
minivan with a flat tire, and she was just standing there kind of looking at it. I don't know. I guess people think it's going to inflate itself. But I walked over there, and my first thing is, do you have a spare? And she said, I do. And I changed it for her right there in the lot. And they took, it was 10 minutes in the heat, but it wasn't a big deal. And went in there, washed my hands, and ate at Chick-fil-A, and went about it. And we're on the way home, and Candy looked at me. She goes, that lady really needed your help.
Oh, yeah.
And she wasn't going around the parking lot asking for help, but I didn't think anything of it. It's just what you do. Hey, there's somebody in need.
Yeah.
And you don't think anything about it. You just do it. So
Don't people think you're crazy because you don't know how people are. There, you got to be passive. Well, so they can't be no crazier than I am.
well, getting back to Gideon,
Gideon.
you think of examples of war leaders because in this case, Gideon in this particular lesson is kind of a war leader. He's leading a band of men to go after the Midianites. And you think about leaders we've had. We've had two Roosevelts. You had Teddy back in the Spanish-American War. You had President Roosevelt during World War II. You had Abe Lincoln and the civil getting us through the Civil War. You had in World War II you had Eisenhower. You had he had people under him, Patton. You look at more recent Schwarzkopf and what he did. In the Afghanistan and in the Afghanistan and the Iraq wars. And these are all you think about these people that were led to do things, and they had people under them that were, I call them their underlings. These men, no matter who they were, couldn't accomplish what they accomplished without the people under them doing the right things. Their leadership helped, but men have to be led, under their leaders, and that to me is kind of what Gideon was. In this case, to me, the leader is God in this situation, and Gideon is that unsung hero because Gideon was not, he was a judge. He was the youngest judge of the group, is what I've read. I've also he came from very humble background, was not, nothing fancy about how he grew up. And there's even a story in there about how at one point he actually ran and hid from the Midianites as he was searching for food just to survive. So he kind of ran from them. I mean, so you could say, oh, well, instead of fighting them, he's kind of a coward. Well, maybe not. So God has a tendency to pick on these kind of people like Gideon to do his work because he knows, again, back to what I said a minute ago, that, he's after getting the glory for himself. And he finds these unknowns to provide that glory back to him. Um, One thing about Gideon that did impress me as this lesson began, credited his victory later on. He credited his victory to God. He did not, at that time, he did not take credit for uh, kicking the Midianites out of the country. Um, After he did his victory, they offered him a king to be the king of Israel. He refused it. He goes, I don't want that. But then he turns around and says, but I'll take some gold because I'm going to take your gold and I'm going to make I guess it's called an ephod. Am I saying that word right? Ephod, basically a ornate, beautiful garment that he had made to remind the people of Israel of his victory. And I think his initial impact was just he didn't really do it to be idolized, but this garment became an idol that people kind of sort of worshiped in a way. And there came a point in Gideon's life in his later years that he lost perspective and started kind of working for Gideon, in his later years. And he kind of got away from giving that glory to God. And then he had a son who did become king of Israel, who continued the spiral down for the Israelites. And that what that spiral create? it created more enemies for Israel. The Ammonites, the Philistines were all in Israel's future because what had started off so good with Gideon, he kind of lost that sight as he got older, and I guess maybe complacent, and even created it in his own son to keep that spiral going down. So anyway, that's kind of ahead of ourselves on that, but that's kind of a quick overview of Gideon and where he came from. So, to get into our lesson, who would like to? Yes,
If you look at that first starting off of it, I'd rather change my name to Gideon than Jerubal anyway.
at least you say it easier.
You know,
Who will read the first part of our lesson? Is called Too Many. It's Judges 7:1 through 3.
Then Jeroboam, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him, rose up early and pitched beside the well of Harod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them, by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, Mine own hand hath saved. Now therefore go to, proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000.
So think about that with Gideon. He had gotten his 32,000 men together to fight 135,000. And now, thinking, okay, I think I can do this. And then all of a sudden, now you've got God telling Gideon, no, too many. We've got to get our people down. So, I told you kind of the end of Gideon where he kind of turned away. But, in this point in time in history, you know, to me, Gideon showed several things that showed his loyalty to God. And some of this is from our last chapter that Kenny did. But, he built an altar to the Lord, sacrificed a young lamb and fire came out of the heaven and consumed the lamb. Now, that's to me, that's a powerful sign that Gideon was being supported by God. He had an angel come to him and tell him, you will not die in this where you're in. You will survive it. So, in respect for that, where the angel came to see him, he built another altar to God at that area. He went around and tore down Baal's altars. Now, this is from Judges 6, but he tore down Baal's altars. Then, per God instructions, tore down a pagan altar, and they replaced it per God's instruction with an altar to God, which was actually dangerous because he was doing things that people didn't approve of. So, and Kenny said this last week. These are things that he actually could have been killed over by people that didn't like what he was doing, but he did it anyway. And then, to me, this all he kind of challenged God. He said, God, he goes, you want me to decrease my troops and go after the Midianites? He said, but I need some signs. And I don't know, this to me, this is almost like toying with God, but that's just my opinion. But he laid a piece of fleece out. Now it's funny. I read a note that said fleece was only mentioned this one time in the Old Testament. It was never mentioned again. Just mentioned the one time. And he told the Lord, he goes, I want you to make the dew wet the fleece, but not the ground around it. That's my sign I'm asking you for. And the Lord did it. Then he turns around with another challenge, which is like, oh, be careful. That fire can still come out of the sky. He asked him that I want the ground to be dry, and I want, uh, no, I'm sorry, I want the ground to be wet and the fleece to be dry. The opposite. Just went the opposite. And God granted it to him. So this tells me God had favor with Gideon because he put up with all this, in my opinion. And I read something like that, and to me, that would feel almost like you're challenging God. But, God complied and showed him. So, as you said when you read the verse, that he went from 32,000 troops down to 10,000 troops. So, you can imagine that all these 22,000 left because they were fearful and afraid. Going into war. Oh yeah, I'm afraid. I'm going home. So 22,000 back. They're gone. So he's got 10,000 troops, and I can imagine what's going through Gideon's head right now is that wow, they've still got 135. They're not back. They're not sending their troops home. Now I've got 10,000. I'm gonna trust God. I'm gonna take my 10,000, and then what happens? Take a look at read the next one. Still too many. Judges 7:4-8.
And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, and the same shall go with thee, and whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, and the same shall not go. So he brought down the people unto the water, and the Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise, every one that boweth down upon his knees to drink. And the number of them that lapped, putting their head to their mouth, hand to their mouth, were 300 men. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand. And let all the other people go, every man unto his place. So the people took their victuals in their hand, and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man unto his tent, and retained those 300 men, and the host of Midian was beneath him in the valley.
So again, why did God come back to him with 10,000 and tell him still too many? Why would God why would God say 10,000 against 135? Still too
Well,
many people.
well, he wanted to make sure that they give the credit to God.
Wanted the glory to God on that.
Mhm.
And and it's funny. I think there's they don't say why, but you can imagine here you've got 10,000 men going to a pool of water, and you've got and he's telling everybody to go take a drink, and you got these guys are getting down their knees, they're bowing their head down into the water and lapping like a dog, just with their tongue licking the water up. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody drink like that in my lifetime. I don't think I've ever seen that. As much as I've spent time in the woods, I've never seen that. But you've got all these guys doing that, and then you've got a group of guys that go down there. They scoop the water with their hands and put it up to their mouth, and they drink, which is what I'm used to seeing. That's kind of. But think about that a minute. So this narrowed his troops down from 10,000 to 300. 9,700 men lapped the water like a dog, and only 300 did it cupped. What does that strike you as? Because something hit me when I was thinking. I'm talking from a military standpoint. Yes, because when you're down with your face in the water, you're not looking at what's going on around you. You're not paying attention to nothing.
Watch nature, dog, cats, anything drink, first thing goes up to ears when they're drinking
Yeah, they're paying attention.
noise, so that's gotta come up.
Yep. So that's the first thing that hit me is these guys that are doing this, they're looking around. They're drinking that water and they're watching the horizon. So what that tells me is God picked the 300 best soldiers for Gideon to have. So, I mean, these things just strike me as I read them as you think about the military part of all this and what they're trying to narrow down to. And you can imagine Gideon's now he's probably a little panicked. He's a human being. He's trusting the Lord, but now he's got 300 against 135,000 men. Now wow, that's a big thing. But God isn't finished with him yet. He's still got another challenge for him that's probably going to make Gideon a little nervous. So let's before I get into that, Read the next one just right. Judges 7:19 through 23.
So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets, and they broke the pitchers that were in their hands. And the three companies blew the trumpets, and broke the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands, to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place around about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. And the host fled to Bethshittah and Zerath, I guess, and to the border of Abimola. Oh, well, I can't pronounce it. And to Tabor. And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, and out of Asher, and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites.
So if you picture this, Gideon's army of 300, they're camped not too far away from the Midianites' 135,000 soldiers as they're preparing for battle with each other. And, at around midnight that night, Gideon snuck down just to listen to what's going on. And he got close to a couple of Midianite guards and heard them talking. And what he heard from the guards is they're talking about a dream they had. And in that dream, they were talking about how they they were told or shown that Gideon's army was going to crush them in the dream. And again, you get back. Why do you think they had a dream like that?
God put that in.
That, today we call it, you do things to put fear in your enemy, to make them make mistakes and make them already think they're losers before they lose. We do that they call it propaganda, is what they do. And if you think about it, God put this dream in these guys, and it was probably more than just the two, because they're probably talking about, oh, the whole camp is already fearful that they've lost, and the battle hadn't even happened yet. Again, there's God's hand reaching into this thing in every aspect of this whole lesson. He's always doing something. So he's got them scared to death before the battle. So Gideon had his 300 soldiers in 3 points surround the Midianites. So, what is that? 133 Gideon soldiers in 3 points all around the Midianites, 135,000. And they waited until midnight, and they each had been given, I mean, you can imagine that Gideon had wanted, he had his sword, he was thinking swords and spears and maybe arrows. We're going to attack them from three sides and we're going to destroy them because God told me so. But then God comes along. No, issue your men a pitcher with a torch in it. And I'm thinking the torch was probably lit. The pitcher kind of hid the torch, is what I'm thinking. And also take this ram horn for a trumpet and issue all this to your soldiers. And you tell the soldiers when it's time to do what they need to do. So I can imagine, Gideon, think about the trust Gideon had to have with God on this one. First, you can't do it with 32,000. You can't do it with 10. You can't, you're going to have 300 soldiers. And then, nope, no weapons, no weapons at all. We're just going to, here's some stuff I want you to carry with you. You can imagine Gideon, he's human. He's probably thinking, whoa, this is going to be interesting. So God instructed him that, that you guide your people when to do this. So all of a sudden, it's nighttime. The Midianites are asleep, most of them. And all of a sudden, Gideon gives the word, blow the trumpets. So they start blowing the trumpets, 300 of them. And now you remember, they're all around them. So they're surrounded with 300 people. So they blow the trumpet and they break the pitchers, which probably make a heck of a noise. And then they've got these lit torches. And the Midianites in the middle, they're looking around, they're hearing and they're yelling. They're yelling the sword the sword of the Lord of Gideon. So you got these guys screaming, breaking pitchers, blowing trumpets. All of a sudden, now it's at night. They're asleep, and they look out. And there's torches all around them, and it creates chaos. They the Midianites don't know what's going on. They've just woke up, and it's like, oh my goodness, we're done. It got so bad they started fighting each other and killing each other with their swords. And then as it imploded completely, they start heading for the Jordan. I think it was east to run away. And yes,
History has another part of that too. That tells you in the history part of reading about the Bible that the Mennonites, the same as when the Indians, would not fight at night because of night blindness.
mm,
They could not see very well at night, so what they were seeing was frightening to them.
yeah, I mean, they went crazy.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
did.
yeah, they
The
ran.
main thing is they knew about the eyesight too, because a lot of them did not fight at night. Even night vision and all now, people see it. Oh man, the armies went wild with it.
Well,
But
we're about out of time. So
yeah,
but
sure.
anyway, what does this remind you of? There was another story that when I was reading that part of the trumpets and what did it remind you of?
Jericho.
Jericho, marching and blowing trumpets and hollering, and then the walls came down. It's just like,
You ever heard the story of the missionary David Livingstone?
mm,
I think he was from Ireland,
mm-hmm,
if I'm correct, and he was over in one of them African nations somewhere as a missionary, and there was this one tribe they were trying to reach, and were having a very difficult time with them. And the chief of that tribe sent word to them that they were going to come into their camp and murder them all that night. And so they, you know, prepared best they could. They never came. So about a year or two later, they were eventually able to get into that tribe and eventually brought the chief of that tribe to Jesus. And David Livingstone asked that chief, he said, a couple of years ago, you said that you were going to come and kill us all, but you didn't come. And that chief said, yes, we did. We came. He said, and your camp was surrounded by 39 giants. And we were afraid and we left. And so later, David Livingstone goes back home to his home church that sent him, and he's telling them this story about the 39 giants.
yeah.
And the church secretary was there. And she asked him, said, do you remember the date when that happened? He said, oh, absolutely. And he told her the date. She went back into the church records. And that night, they had a church service. And they were praying for David Livingstone and his people. And there was 39 people in attendance at that church praying.
The Giants. Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, I know about Gideon death. About a couple of months ago, I was waking up in the middle of the night. If y'all ever heard radio with all this boom, 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 boom. Oh, man, they had a cut through bridges out on 36 that used my dirt road for a cut through. As soon as I started hearing that, my house started shaking. Both ends went up like this. Said, Lord, I was a cat on the hot tin roof. What's going on? Boom, 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 boom. I said, good Lord, what's happening? And then somebody going by the car with all that boom boom going on. I don't know how many others that woke up going down the road, but I tell you what, I was ready to get my gun out and start shooting. I'll be honest with you.
Brian, would you like to dismiss us?
Heavenly Father, it's nice to be here gathered among the believers and all that believe in you and trust in your life, Lord, of what you've lived, and we hope for your return. Be good to us this week, Lord. Lead us, guide us, and protect us. And all that's having problems, sickness, illnesses, whatever they're having, Lord, be with them, guide them to this. Be with us, Lord. Amen.
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 Thank you, everybody, for putting up with me.
Done good, man. We listen.